Tonight's big stories. In Jakarta for the 43rd ASEAN Summit, President Bongbong Marcos tells Chinese Premier Li Qiang that the Philippines will assert its sovereign rights in the South China Sea.
The Philippine Science High School faces a massive cut to its budget next year to the tune of 329 million pesos. Other DOST agencies also lose millions in funding.
And we will be having a chat with Gilas Pilipinas point guard Kiefer Ravena about the national team's performance during the FIBA World Cup and their preparations for the upcoming Asian Games.
Welcome to the show. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Dani Laurel.
And I'm Sean Yao.
It's day 2 of the ASEAN Summit in Jakarta, Indonesia, where President Bongbong Marcos has made headlines for coming up to Chinese Premier Li Qiang and telling him directly that the Philippines is upholding its sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea. Let's listen to that soundbite.
We must emphasize that practical cooperation in the maritime domain can only flourish with an enabling environment of regional peace, security, stability, anchored in international law. The Philippines, therefore, continues to uphold the primacy of the 1982 UN Convention under the Law of the Sea as the framework within which all activities in the seas and oceans are conducted.
As a Filipino, I applaud that statement. It was a very
said
strong.
very strong, but said very diplomatically.
Exactly, which only Bongbong Marcos can pull off.
Well,
Marcos can pull off.
To each his own upholding, though, because then there's the 10-dash line issue as well. So let's
Exactly.
just all uphold.
Let's uphold our own beliefs. No. But
there-
that he said that to clarify at the sideline event of the which is
So
the
not the main
26th
summit.
which is the 26th ASEAN China Summit. Which, if some viewers were wondering why would the Chinese premier be there, because it's just ASEAN, right? There's a separate summit for ASEAN and China, and that's where President Marcos came up to Chinese Premier Li Qiang.
And we also note that, Chinese President Xi Jinping did not attend this ASEAN-China summit, so we don't know what exactly President BBM would have said should he have been there. But nevertheless,
That's an interesting conversation. I wish I
He
would
was
be a
reading.
fly on the wall of that
Fly
one, diba?
It seemed, though, that he was reading, as he usually does, from a prepared speech or
Yes.
something written. But who knows? He could have several to adjust to whoever is in attendance.
Well, there is even actually a photo of Marcos and Li Qiang meeting on the sidelines of the ASEAN. There we go on your screen. Ahead of that meeting with China, Marcos also spoke about disputed waters at the retreat session yesterday. And there, he unequivocally opposed claims that the South China Sea territorial dispute was caused by the rivalry between U.S. and China. The president says that while the U.S. is the country's most vocal ally in defending the territory, painting the dispute as a contest between Beijing and Washington robs the Philippines of its autonomy. U.S. President Joe Biden, meanwhile, skipped the ASEAN meet and sent his Vice President Kamala Harris in his place.
The Philippines firmly rejects misleading narratives that frame the disputes in the South China Sea solely through the lens of strategic competition between two powerful countries. This not only denies us our independence and our agency, but it also disregards our own legitimate interests.
Still, Marcos urged all involved parties in the South China Sea row to exercise restraint so as not to further complicate the territorial dispute. He underscored that the Philippines is not gunning for conflict, but that the country is only defending its rights over the region.
But let me be clear, we do not seek conflict, but it is our duty as citizens and as leaders to always rise to meet any challenge to our sovereignty, to our sovereign rights, and our maritime jurisdictions in the South China Sea. No country would expect any less. No country would do any less.
the Chinese Premier Li Qiang did not directly address territorial issues in the South China Sea during the ASEAN-China summit, but he did say that China is willing to, quote, seek common ground and set aside differences with ASEAN countries to handle disagreements. He also warned of a, quote, new Cold War if conflicting countries do not, quote, appropriately handle differences and disputes.
管控分歧，当前很重要的是要反对选边站队，反对集团对抗，反对新冷战，要妥善处理国家之间的分歧和争端。
Well, I guess things that we have to look forward to, if that can even be called looking forward. Philippine Ambassador Babes Romualdez, ambassador to the United States, has confirmed that there will be a trilateral meeting between the U.S., the Philippines, and Japan.
On the sidelines of this event, I guess, where the West Philippine Sea or / South China
Should
Sea
be
issues
discussed.
should be discussed.
But again, there's no clear schedule of that meeting yet. They're saying it's quite hectic, but again, it would be very, very fruitful if that should happen.
One thing that is for sure, there will be a gala dinner tonight.
Of
Everyone's
course,
got to eat.
so
they
there
will-
always is. These functions
And
are
the
always
best conversations happen
exactly
during at
Exactly.
dinner time.
ASEAN summits. It's not, you don't pick up the best parts with the
In
prepared
bilateral
speeches. It's usually on the
On the
sidelines,
sidelines.
off cam, during the dinners.
So you can be the fly in the ASEAN-China summit, and we can be the flies in that dinner.
You're so big. Well, here to discuss the ASEAN Summit, we have with us on the show De La Salle University International Studies Professor Renato De Castro. Professor, good evening. Thanks for coming on again with us tonight.
Good evening. How are you doing?
We are very well. Just having a dig at what's going on over there in Jakarta, Indonesia. But my first question to you is, you heard us report about the ASEAN-China Summit. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has warned of a new Cold War, quote unquote, if conflicting countries do not appropriately handle differences and disputes. What should we make of that?
Well, that's the usual Chinese mantra, rhetoric. Every time you challenge China, you're triggering a Cold War. We're going back to the Cold War. That's always their narrative. Every Chinese academic, every Chinese diplomat would say, every time you challenge China, you're triggering. We're going back to the old Cold War, which is kind of, it doesn't make any sense.
Prof, does it
No,
mean,
it's not a new Cold War. It's a totally different situation.
Prof, does it mean that their stance has hardened, softened, changed in any way? Or like you said, nothing really has changed despite their statements saying that they're willing to cooperate, they're willing to have more discussions?
China's always been consistent, always applying hard line. And this was clearly reflected when they came out with that map, official map, which announced to the world, no matter what you do, no matter how much you oppose us, no matter if you file a case in the Permanent Court of Arbitration, and the court would come out, of course, with a ruling that basically declares China's 9-9 claim has no legal basis. And of course, you have slowly and surely the entry of external powers. We're trying to avoid it. President Marcos mentioned it, that as much as possible, we don't want to be caught in this geostrategic dynamics. But they're happening primarily because, simple reason, China is pushing the smaller states of ASEAN to basically rely on what you call old-style balance of power politics. You have to use other great powers to balance a great power that is bent, of course, on maritime expansion in our own maritime domain, and that's no less than China.
Right, Professor, what about on the other side? What do you think about what President Marcos said? He was unequivocal, but as we have noted, he seemed a bit diplomatic as well. As we know, as China is consistent, we have been a bit inconsistent, at least with the changing administration. So what do you make of these latest pronouncements from Marcos Jr.?
Well, it's good. I really don't expect this because I was, of course, listening when he was still a candidate. Around February 2022, he was still very much skeptical about the wisdom of filing the case against China in the Permanent Court of Arbitration. He was, of course, repeating the mantra of the former president that if we challenge China, this will trigger war. Everyone who challenges China is a warmonger. That is the narrative of the former president. He even mentioned it in February 2022. Now, of course, it's a totally different approach. And of course, again, no one is to be blamed but China for his, very strong stance when it comes to the West Philippine Sea issue.
Right. Also, notably absent from that summit was, of course, Chinese President Xi Jinping. He instead sent Li Qiang there, his premier. Is that in itself a statement that we can, glean something from?
Well, I think there's a pattern. It's also announced that President Xi Jinping will not be attending the G20 summit in India. So we don't know what's the reason. We simply don't know what's happening inside the Politburo. That's a decision made by the Politburo.
So, Prof, what can be expected from this ASEAN-China summit when it comes to this issue? Is there any progress that can be hoped for at this point?
Well, what is very clear is, of course, the pushback. Not only, of course, coming from the Philippines, but even before this, of course, you have the reaction of a number of ASEAN countries, starting, of course, with Malaysia. When China came out with the official map, you have the strong pushback coming from Malaysia, which is kind of very interesting because Malaysia, as much as possible, tried to maintain a quiet diplomacy. Then, of course, later we had the Philippines, later Vietnam and Indonesia and even Brunei. And, of course, the speech of President Marcos in the ASEAN-China meeting, in a way, is a continuation of this pushback. And interestingly, I think it has been covered in Jakarta. And just look at the faces of the heads of states of Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam. In a way, there was a sort of a glee when they say the Philippines basically taking a stand. And although they're not very vocal about it, they are sympathetic to our stand in terms of course, challenging China head on, which, of course, Indonesia could not do because Indonesia is the host country.
But pushback aside, President Marcos says there's some progress in talks over South China Sea Code of Conduct. I know what you're thinking every year or every time ASEAN Summit rolls around, they talk about some progress. But this time around, do you feel it's different? Are we really going to get something out of it, do you think?
I don't think so. Honestly, I don't think so. There's so many obstacles, four major obstacles, why the Code of Conduct simply would not take up the ground.
What are they?
Number one, the most basic, of course, is geographic scope. China's position is this. Remember, China claims 85% of the South China Sea. So Chinese position is it does not apply into areas that China already considered its territorial waters.
All right, Professor.
So of course the ASEAN position is the whole of the South China Sea. But China's position is we own 85% of the South China Sea. So it does not apply. The Code of Conduct does not apply inside the waters of the 9-dash line. So what's the use of the Code of Conduct if it will not cover the entire South China Sea? Then, of course, another Chinese position. The Code of Conduct should be voluntary. The ASEAN position is that it should be binding. So that also creates another problem. Then, of course, the Chinese position that the Chinese have been pushing, once you have a Code of Conduct, all countries should inform each other, including China, that they'll be conducting a military exercise. So in a way, we're giving China a veto when we have to conduct military exercises with Australia, with Japan, and with the United States. Automatically, this is opposed by several ASEAN countries.
Right,
so, of course, the final point, of course, is whether the Code of Conduct should be based, and this is something that the Philippines has been asserting recently, should be based on international law, and more specifically, the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. As much as possible, China wants the Code of Conduct to be simply a political and diplomatic exercise, abstracted from, of course, the basis of international law. So those are the four major obstacles, while the Code of Conduct would, simply would not take off the ground.
Thanks for laying out those four principles, Professor. Now, I wanted to ask you a little bit backward. President Marcos, in his pronouncements, he has said that the rivalry between China and the United States is not the reason why we have this territorial dispute to begin with. You think China would perceive that as a defense of our treaty partner, the United States? How would they take that?
No, it's coming from President Duterte because, I'm sorry, President Marcos, terribly sorry. Oh gosh, might end up shooting myself. President Marcos, you're distinguish the gold from pétant. So, familiar with French history, you'll understand what I'm saying. So President Marcos is basically telling the Chinese, he's reacting to the Chinese narrative. Every time we challenge China, the Chinese are telling us, even when we filed the case in the Permanent Court of Arbitration, during the time of the late President Benigno Aquino III, the Chinese are telling, you have been told by the Americans to do this. Everything that we do is something that, of course, has been formulated, has been implemented from Washington, D.C. So President Marcos is telling the Chinese, this issue is between you and us. The Americans have nothing to do with this. So he's basically asserting the fact that in the real world, our decisions regarding the West Philippine Sea is autonomous from the Americans because it is based on our national interests. Because the Chinese narrative, oh, you're just puppets, running dogs of the Americans. You're just creating problems in the South China Sea because you're being manipulated from Washington, D.C.
Prof,
So you have to understand the context of this when he said it.
Prof, back to the ASEAN-China summit, no? China is not directly addressing these issues on the South China Sea. You mentioned that this is, of course, a political, diplomatic issue that might never be resolved. Can we say that we can continue having economic ties, we can continue with these ASEAN discussions and having mutual benefits without ever resolving this WPS issue?
Yeah, it will take probably a generation to resolve this issue because, just simply based on when China released that map, China is simply determined to realize its goal of controlling 85% of the South China Sea. Will the maritime states of ASEAN countries accept this? And of course, you have also the third parties. You have, of course, the United States and its allies, and other countries who have interest in ensuring that the South China Sea remains a sea common to all, not to be dominated or controlled, using the term of President Marcos, although he was not referring to China, by a hegemon. Interestingly, I find the term, when he used the term hegemonic or hegemon, my goodness, this is a very strong terminology.
Well, here's hoping it isn't what you think it could turn out to be. But thank you for joining us tonight, De La Salle
Yes.
University International Studies Professor Renato De Castro.
All right, we're going to pause for a quick break. Right after that, agencies under the Department of Science and Technology will see their budget slashed for next year. Chief among them is the Philippine Science High School. The details when the big story returns. Keep it here. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
A little bit of bad news. The Philippine Science High School is getting a budget cut next year. A big one, I should say. During budget deliberations at the lower house, it was revealed that PSI will lose about 329 million pesos in 2024. That's because the budget department only approved 2.7 billion pesos for PSI, about 1.5 billion less than what the State Science High School proposed. School management say the budget cut will affect their operations, including some infrastructure projects. It's not just PSI. Other DOST agencies also will see budget cuts. There's the Food and Nutrition Research Institute getting nearly a 50 million peso cut. Even research and development on weather science is getting less funding next year. That, as well as other science and tech programs and institutes.
We've been getting hit on the education front in terms of budget allocations non-stop. This is just the newest, I think, installment in the saga.
So not just CHED issue on
Yeah, we
cutting
were just
that.
discussing
We're
the
going
CHED
to
issue.
high school now. Right.
But at the moment, it's no longer just schools and residents that are caught in between the turf dispute between Makati and Taguig. The $3.5 billion Makati subway project is now at risk of being scrapped amid jurisdiction issues. Project developer Infradev Holdings disclosed to the Philippine Stock Exchange that the alignment of the subway will, quote, no longer be feasible. Infradev explained that the planned depot and stations under the subway project will be in the affected areas that are now under Taguig. The Makati subway project was supposed to be the first subway in the country, scheduled for partial opening in 2025.
Okay, so we're gonna lose a big chunk. That is not, again, let's make it clear, that's the Makati subway project, not the same as the Metro Manila subway project, but they were at some point supposed to like merge
Right.
and interconnect.
And also, we don't have confirmation at this point that the project has been scrapped. It's just a statement at
Yeah.
the moment that
What are
they've
they
submitted.
supposed to do?
Exactly.
Yeah,
They
because
just
it
said
was
to the stock exchange that it's no longer feasible because it's actually a PPP partnership
Yeah.
project.
Specifically with Makati.
Exactly,
Yeah.
specifically with the
So-
city of Makati. So now that the areas are within Taguig's jurisdiction, it changes the whole legal aspect of this project, right?
But
Ano
it's
yun?
definitely
What
something that
happens?
is
Do you have to
fixable.
start?
I think it is
It
fixable.
might take a lot of time.
In theory,
So,
it's
yeah,
But
exactly.
they've also been hounded by, they lost the JV with this Japanese company just a few years ago in 2021, I think. So just right before
So it
this
could be a
issue.
funding thing
So
as
there's
well.
also funding
Yeah.
issues they're hounding. So yeah, a lot to be investigated in terms of what that issue is going to add
We're
to
trying
their,
to get confirmation
their
from
woes.
Philippine Infradev at this point whether or not they're going to push through with the project. But so far, they said they will be meeting with Taguig and Makati as well, I guess, and then we'll see.
And like
Go
you
from there.
mentioned, the stock exchange could step in because you know the share price might also be affected. So might
So
be
we'll watch out for
watching
that
for
and what will happen to that. Now, going back to a little bit more of bad news again, just one day after the start of the price cap for regular and well-milled rice, some retailers are saying that their supplies are already running low. In some markets in Metro Manila, regular and well-milled rice have all but disappeared. According to vendors, they have not been able to source stock that they can sell at 41 and 45 pesos. But even when stocks are available, some retailers say that the regular customers still prefer to buy the 51 peso rice due to its better quality.
Kung iobliga din nila kaming babaan yung presyo, kung ano yung stock namin, yun na lang siguro ang ano namin, may ibebenta namin. Oo, palugi talaga yun. Sasakripisyo na lang namin.
So how are those markets doing in terms of supply and following this rice price cap? Let's bring in Julie Baiza for the details. Julie, what do you have for us on the ground there?
Danny, as I went through this market in Mandaluyong City earlier today, it was easy to spot supplies of regular milled and well-milled rice. However, some vendors were still selling this at over 50 pesos. They explained that they would incur significant losses if they followed the price cap. Over in Pasig City, some consumers were able to buy sacks of regular milled and well-milled rice at 41 and 45 pesos. However, vendors complained once more about their losses when selling at that price point. The Trade Department, meanwhile, reiterated that only regular milled and well-milled rice are covered by the price cap. For now, non-compliant vendors will receive warnings regarding the price ceiling on rice. The agency also assured that the price cap on rice won't last long as the harvest season is approaching. Danny?
All right, so market vendors already having trouble to meet this rice price cap. Thank you, Julie Baiza. Meantime, another gun-toting incident in the metro has recently surfaced. In a Facebook post, attorney Raymond Fortun, who also shared the road rage incident involving an ex-cop, called attention to this latest incident which happened in Valenzuela City. Now in the video, you can see the driver of a private vehicle suddenly pulling out his gun while going towards the taxi driver. The incident reportedly happened last August 19th at around 1 a.m. Fortun said that these incidents will keep happening unless laws are enacted to protect citizens. The lawyer also appealed to the LGUs and the national government to take action. He also urged the LTO to address this.
I would assume that the LTO would also now forward yung details nitong owner noong Toyota Fortuner to the proper authorities. Now again, this is another incident where a public crime has been committed. And through the magic and help of our technologies now, very, very helpful ito para ma-prosecute at mapanagot itong mga taong ganito.
The attorney Fortun has become the face of road rage defenders everywhere.
Yeah, he is now the Rafi tool for road rage.
Go, attorney Fortun.
Message him with all the
Yeah,
videos.
if you get caught out in the street, right, with the road rager, like attorney Fortun, like.
Honestly, I just hope he does not get tired of fighting for our rights on the road. Because if he doesn't, it's a pretty big cudgel to take and to carry.
It's a personal connection maybe to
Yeah,
road rage.
it must take a lot of effort and a lot of his time, right? And a lot of labor.
Well, at least it's timely because now the Senate is currently investigating in aid of legislation these road rage incidents. So at least they will have a lot more material, and the frequency might influence,
A lot of material, but here's hoping something actually comes off it, right?
Of course, there's always
Diba?
that.
Penalty for carrying a gun in the car. First of
Exactly,
all.
especially if you're a dismissed police. All right, we're going to pause for a quick one right now, but up next, you got to stay with us because we'll be having a chat with Gilas Pilipinas guard Kiefer Ravena over the national team's performance at the FIBA World Cup. Keep it here on One News.
And you're still watching the big story here on One News. 24th, that is Gilas Pilipinas' final standing in the FIBA World Cup as it managed to secure a slot in the Olympic qualifying tournament that will be held next year. Now to speak to us about his experience and learnings from the FIBA World Cup, we have with us Gilas point guard Kiefer Ravena, Kiefer, good evening and welcome to The Big Story.
Hello, good evening po. Magandang gabi and thanks for having me.
All right, Kiefer, let's kick off with 24th place. Are you happy with that? Now that you're in Japan, you're able to take a step back and maybe reevaluate what happened.
Syempre, it could have been better. I felt like we had a couple of wins a couple of games that we could have actually pulled off with a win, no? Definitely not satisfied and not happy. Siguro, happy lang ako na natapos namin yung World Cup na injury-free. We were able to come out of it healthy and a lot of, experience that we could bring individually sa mga careers namin.
Which loss actually hurt you the most, Kiefer? I mean, I'm talking about Dominican Republic, Angola, South Sudan.
Actually, as the tournament went by, yung pinaka masakit na talo was the Dominican Republic talaga. Kung titingnan mo, I felt like, it could have been at that stage, it could have been a turning point kagad na we would have a lot of confidence, we would lose a lot of pressure na manalo ng laro in front of our crowd. Yung mga ganung bagay. And, after the Angola game, parang the pressure just mounted and mounted wherein, the goal was to make it to the second round to, let's just get a victory. And, sooner or later, nagawa naman namin yon, although it was a little too late. But nevertheless, I felt like, we still accomplished something as a team.
Alright, yung pagkapanalo ninyo, no, yung pinakahuli yung game, doon kayo nanalo, was it because gigil na kayo or nakakuha kayo, nakapulot kayo ng mga learnings from the first couple of or three losses leading up to that game versus China kasi biglang marangkada kayo doon eh?
Siyempre, marami din kaming, film na napanood, marami kaming, things na nagawa namin ng consistent, hindi namin nagawa. And actually, apat nga yun apat na talo yun, kasama pa yung sa South Sudan, no? Pero, things clicked lang. I guess there was a lot of motivation also playing against China. Excuse me, syempre, Asian neighbors natin sila. Ayaw natin magpatalo doon. And for us, it was, beyond basketball siguro, na gusto lang namin mabigyan ng magandang show yung mga taong nanood sa amin. And I think Jordan Clarkson was able to do that.
Okay, Kiefer, you've been playing for a very long time and also in the international scene. Was this pressure different because we were the hosts and because you were up against, or you're hosting, you have to be the ambassadors of the Philippines as well for big international players?
Hindi naman siguro. I guess siguro yung pressure lang was there, pero we still wanted to play basketball. We still wanted to have fun. And, the expectations of the Philippine crowd gets to show the passion of the Filipinos when it comes to basketball. So, nandun lang siguro yun. Pero as much as possible, we tried not to be affected and we tried to use, the crowd to our advantage. And I think there were certain instances naman na nagawa naman namin talaga yun.
Right, Kiefer, looking at the whole series, all these games, we can really see na nag-evolve na yung basketball. Hindi na siya kapareho nung last World Cup even. We see some upsets, not just for the Team Philippines, right? But for other teams, Team USA even, we see certain countries doing really, really well. For you, and I know for Gretchen, she will probably ask you this question because she asked Grant Hill this. In what ways has the game evolving na naka-affect sa performance natin sa World Cup na to? And what learnings can we get from that evolution going into, of course, the Asian Games next and maybe other World Cups in the future?
Siguro si Gretch kasi mahilig din sa basketball yan Naglalaro-laro pa yan minsan sa Moro. Nung bata pa ako. Pero, I mean, kidding aside, the game has evolved in ways na besides the talent of the young generation of basketball players, the tactical aspect of the game has evolved in so many ways na it's become a chess match Parang gone are the days na nagpapagalingan na lang yung tao, pound for pound. Tapos, talent per talent. Ano na yun medyo na-offset na ng ibang countries yun with how their system works. So, I mean, it's not hindi siya samba kasi it's been going on for quite some time now. Diba? The last World Cup, ang nag-champion, Spain, nag-evolve na din yung mga favorites in the past start losing, which gets to show na, diba, the world is catching up, whether Asian level, America's level, African level, yung mga ganon. Everybody's catching up and developing. So, looking forward na sana, marami tayong lessons na natutunan dito sa previous World Cup na to and ito sa ongoing World Cup na pwede natin ma-apply sa mga darating na tournaments natin in the future. Kasi yung basketball hindi naman po titigil mag-evolve yan di ba? Nasa sa atin na lang kung paano tayo magiging adaptable, paano tayo mag-a-adjust, paano natin naayusin yung sistema natin and eventually makikita natin yung results once we stay patient with one thing.
Having said that, Kiefer, give us a prediction of the future of Gilas and what you see happening, especially with the Asian Games just around the corner.
Yun nga parang hirap din sabihin, especially hindi pa nga tapos yung World Cup Ngayon, meron na namang malaking paghahandaan yung Asian Games. And I think, I read it somewhere na yung Asian Games talagang pride at stake yan more than just a tournament yan. Kasi nga, ito yung mga usual na nakakalaban natin. And siguro the future, not really sure on how, the team will be fixing everything and who will be part of the team. Ngayon na nandito na kami sa Japan, yung mga Japan boys, tapos yung ibang mga players din na naglalaro overseas, magsisimula na yung mga tournaments namin. So hopefully, in more ways than one, nakatulong kami dun sa preparation na yun na nakita natin yung mga pwede nating ma-apply. Tapos magawa natin siya pagdating ng Asian Games this coming 3rd, 4th week of September.
You talked about using the home crowd to your advantage, but in the post-game press con, si Coach Chot Reyes also mentioned that the booing affected the team's morale, right? He was booed when he was during the lineup introductions. Is that true? And kwento mo naman what your experiences with that.
Siguro it affects us in a way na parang nagtataka lang kami na in our home crowd nangyayari yon. Even si Jordan Clarkson, who was really left confused about the situation. Pero yung other side naman nun, syempre yung mga Pinoy fans, sabi ko nga, nakikita lang natin yung pagiging passionate nila tsaka yung pagsuporta talaga nila sa national team is yung gusto talaga nila makuha yung mga panalo. 'Di ba? Lahat naman kami kasama dyan na ako rin siguro sa part ko, I also get the other end of the stick, 'di ba? Na pag natatalo, maraming nasasabi yung mga tao, which is normal naman, napupuna lahat. Pero pag nananalo naman yan, I guess everything eases out. So, the more we get to fix our program and really make sure that we're headed to the right direction in the future, yung mga Pilipinong yan, hindi naman titigil sumuporta sa atin yan.
Oo nga, actually, you were dati rin nabubuka. Sorry to say, pero
hindi
sanay ka na.
Sanay na
po
yan.
dati.
Right.
Madalas naman po.
Oo nga, lalo
Madalas
na,
naman.
even when you were announced as part of the roster, right? But I wanted to know, nagulat ba kayo when Coach Chot announced that he was stepping aside? Or did you know?
Nagulat kami
players.
kasi wala naman siyang sinabihan. He never really told anybody na he was gonna do that right after the tournament. So, but I guess, with that being said, with Coach Chot, I kind of feel, better for him kasi ang laking pressure na nawala sa kanya and I'm sure yung mga naririnig niya, mga sinasabi ng mga tao sa kanya, since tapos na siya, may peace of mind na siya, makakatulog na siya ng maayos kasi sinasabi na din sa amin na nakaka-stress din talaga pag World Cup kasi ang dami mong iniisip, lalo na you only have less than 24 hours to prepare for a game, di ba? For in between games, and you're not just preparing for any other game, you're preparing for the Worlds. So sa coaching wise, stress na stress yung mga yan, pati yung other coaching staff niya.
Okay.
Right. Kiefer, matanong ko lang, no, you're one of the first Pinoys to go to Japan, play abroad as a professional in the B-League, of course. Ang daming sumunod sa'yo. That experience of playing in Japan, how has it changed Gilas? Kasi marami-rami sa inyo ang naglalaro dyan.
Yeah.
Nagbago ba yung laro nyo? And also looking at Japan, who did like pretty well, I think surprisingly, and madaming nagulat, no? Hindi naman surprisingly, pero maraming nagulat sa pagkapanalo nila. How is it like over there? Okay ba?
Okay naman, masaya naman. Malungkot lang na, labo ng sinabi ko, pero malungkot lang na malayo sa pamilya.
Okay.
Pero, basketball-wise, it's fun. Learning a different style, a different culture. And, speaking of the Japanese basketball team, national team, actually hindi kami nagulat eh. Yung mga players na naglalaro dito. Kasi nakita naman namin since the first time we came here, halos pinaghahandaan na talaga nila yung World Cup. Doon pa lang inaayos na nila kung sino yung magiging naturalized players nila, naririnig na namin, nakikita na namin kung sino yung mga pwedeng mapunta sa lineup, and yung program nila was really set in stone talaga na ito yung susundan natin. Na may mga games na matatalo talaga tayo, mananalo tayo, pero stick tayo sa direction na gusto natin mapuntahan. And the Japanese people have always been supportive of their country, whether basketball, soccer, football, baseball, ano man yan. Sobrang ibang klaseng support nila. Nakita din namin yon. So, pagdating ng World Cup, hindi naman kami nagulat na talagang nag-perform sila at a very high level, and being the best Asian country, that they also qualified for the Olympics.
Okay. Kiefer, very quickly, no, can you confirm that you will be joining Gilas, should you be included in the final 12 for the Asian Games, or will this affect your schedule in Japan?
Actually, hindi pa kami nakakapag-usap, pero I've already expressed my side nung before pa matapos yung World Cup na mahihirapan na ako maglaro sa Asian Games because conflict of schedule na talaga, and I have to be here for my team. I really don't know, hindi pa ako nakakommit sa kanila, hindi pa ako nakakapagsabi ng kahit anong decision sa kanila regarding my situation, whether I'll play or not. Pero, by the looks of our schedule right now, I think I won't be able to play for the said Asian Games.
Okay, thank you, and please keep us updated on that. Thank you so much for joining us. That was, of course, Kiefer
Thank you.
Ravena.
Congratulations.
Alright, congratulations. Ang sarap naman talaga kausapin ng mga players natin. Pero for now, break muna tayo. Right after that, could an animal's photo pass through the SIM registration portal or platform? And the answer apparently is yes, after a recent test conducted by the NBI. More on that when the big story returns. Keep it here.
Now, this headline sounds like a bit of a joke, but stay with me on this. A monkey successfully registers a SIM card here in the Philippines.
It's not
Now,
April
how
Fool's naman, no?
absurd is that?
Only in the Philippines.
Well, guys, maybe not as absurd as we think. The NBI finds out that you can successfully register a SIM card using fake photos, or at least in their test run, even if you use the photo of this smiling monkey. The NBI told senators that the night before the hearing, they also tried using different names and other fake photos for SIM registration, and these were still accepted. The NBI says this is proof that anyone could register their SIMs using fraudulent identities, something that senators expressed concern on.
Buti nga nakangiti po. Kasi kung hindi, baka hindi yung binagbigyan yan. If you're with the telcos and you see this application form of that monkey smiling at you, what the heck are you doing? It's common sense na hindi dapat pagbigyan to dahil hindi ko natin mahuhuli yung mga gumagawa ng kalokohan dito.
Wala akong masabi. News of the day.
Actually, nakita ko siya
Baka
sa...
yun pala yung headline.
Nakita ko siya sa Instagram. Unggoy talaga.
Yes,
Well, we are descended from monkeys, so...
We have the
but-
same kind of like features.
Exact, the bone structure, whatever. But
Ewan ko sa'yo.
how did the telco companies respond to the senator's inquiry into these animal photos? Let's bring in Francis Orsho to tell us. Francis, what's the answer?
Reg, Globe Telecom explains that their process of SIM registration is automated, which means they cannot immediately verify all applications. They say that it would be a big help if they're given access to the database of agencies that issue government IDs so they can easily verify users' identities. But the firm says many are not in favor of this move due to data privacy issues. Still, Globe admits that there may have been some technical glitches in their registration system. Smart, on the other hand, says their system has a post-validation process. They say they will also conduct their own investigation into fake identities entered into the registration system. Reg?
Thanks for that answer. I was wondering, Francis Orsho.
All right, before we end tonight's show, our big picture tonight is on the ASEAN. That's right, that is President Marcos and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau meeting on the sidelines of the summit, where, as we have said, all the exciting things happen. Now, amid the bilateral talks, it's the Philippine flag behind Trudeau that's getting more attention. As you can see, the flag colors are inverted, which under our heraldic code signifies war. The DFA was quick to issue a statement saying it was an honest mistake on the part of the organizers.
We were just having a conversation a few weeks ago about how strict our heraldic code is
Like
and how
it's
they can
very
penalize you.
simple
Yeah,
issue.
yeah. You're not even, allowed to wear it.
Bring it
you
to
know, bring it
games.
yeah, there's rules around that. And now, in a
None of it.
diplomatic, high-level diplomatic event, we had it
An
inverted.
official photographer.
Yikes.
Of course.
Oo nga, yikes.
All right, that's it for the show tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.